On this week's episode, I'm joined by Hanae Bezad. Hanae is originally from Morocco, spent a large part of her life in France, and is now calling Portugal her home for more than a year. Hanae is also an entrepreneur, a technologist, and a book author. We discuss, amongst other things, how Hanae discovered Portugal, the things that attracted her, what made her decide to spend more time here. We talk about the welcoming nature and openness and curiosity of the Portuguese people and the Portuguese culture. We talk about what Hanae loves about living everyday life in this country. And since Hanae's name means serenity, we speak about how Hanae finds her serenity right here in Portugal. For those of you listening, head over to our YouTube channel to watch some of this episode. And for those of you watching, click down below and subscribe. And for the full podcast episode, go to Google, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And now, over to my conversation with Hanae. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. And I'm really happy to be joined here by Hanae Bezad. Hanae, thank you for being on the podcast. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me.
So Hanae, why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about you?
Yes. So my name is Hanae. Thanks for pronouncing it right. It's really rare. I'm from Morocco. My name means serenity in Arabic. I usually get a Hanae or Hani or honey, but it means, serenity in Arabic. I grew up in Morocco and I then moved to France. I studied in Paris and started my career actually in Paris. Lived for a bit in this period of time in the US, in Philly. But then most of it I actually spent in Paris. And then after a decade in Europe, I decided to move back to Morocco to kind of bring a contribution to that nascent innovative ecosystem by setting up a coding school. And then after 4 years, fully Africa focused, I decided to move back up north. I wasn't so sure where. I had a few projects here and there. I was a bit nomadic for a while, and then eventually last year, I decided to move to Lisbon. So I've been at Lisboeta for a year now. Very happy to be.
Why Portugal? How did that all start? What were your first visits and your first experiences of this country?
I was 15 when I visited the first time with my parents, and it was a beautiful summer. We were out of a year that was quite intense for us because my sister had cancer at the time and was just in remission. And so during that time, we decided to come to Portugal. After we were like four of us, 4 out of 5. And eventually my parents went back earlier than us. So it was my sister and I just roaming around. I discovered Lisbon through that lens. And I also remember doing a scuba diving class. So for the first time. So from there, I kind of kept Portugal as this beautiful, easy destination where people were very kind. I mean, I can tell you one of the first anecdotes that I remember was that our car broke on the way to Portugal right after we crossed the border from Spain.
You drove to Portugal?
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
so even,
Okay.
I grew up in Rabat, and so Rabat to Albufeira, that's where we were heading. It was less than, we left in the morning and we got there at night. And with that challenge of the car, we had to stop, and someone picked us up and he took us to a village because he needed to do a few things in the market. We stayed there for a couple of hours, but then he drove us to our final destination, which was so unheard of, so kind. So yes, I kept Portugal as this fabulous destination.
I mean, what were those pieces for you? What were some of those things that you looked at that attracted you on those first visits, but also made you think, I want to be here. I want to spend more time in this place.
I started to make friends that were very much on the same page in terms of values, in terms of aspiring to create something different. So for me, I needed to be in a place where I would sense a possibility to be free, to discover new creative spaces, to feel a sort of expansion, and a place that would be also culturally and ethnically diverse. I feel safe in Lisbon. I like to roam around. I love the light of the city. I love its colors. I love its I love, you know, again, in some places, in some neighborhoods, you find people dancing samba. I was able to discover so many different dances here in the past year, Gaga, for Brazilian funk, and so on. And that makes me happy. That brings me a lot of joy. And that for me, living in a place that can uphold this joy is super important at this point in my life.
There is this openness, and it doesn't really matter where you're from, that exists here in Portugal. Is that something that you felt?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. It matters in a positive way, I would say. You know, I feel like my connection to the history of Portugal is very visceral in many ways. Like I said, I grew up in Morocco. Eventually, with time and kind of traveling in so many different places and feeling activated by so many different cultures in the Middle East and some other places, at some point I was curious to go beyond the story that I was told about my ancestry. And I did a DNA test with 23andMe, and I do have a percentage of my DNA that's Portuguese.
But I mean, how has that experience been for you now as a resident living here?
Yeah,
It must feel a bit different, but has it still been a positive experience?
it's still a very positive experience. I'd say 1 year in, we're extending the honeymoon in Portugal and I. At the beginning, when I came with an approach of let's try it out. I'm also in a phase of feeling a little bit burnt out, needing to create a lot more space for creative projects and regenerate very much. So I kind of gave myself a few months, and it was relatively easy. I mean, I had a friend who was renting her apartment. I could then just travel around, do my things, had travels abroad, had to come back and so on. And so for the first few months, I was in Portugal, but I wasn't feeling completely committed to being there. I started some of the paperwork for sure, but I could also have, you know, being absorbed by other projects. Now I feel very much at home. I feel, you know, I have my places to go to. I still have a lot to discover, which is exciting. But I feel the right level of stimulation and very much at home.
There's so many different examples of people where it's this use of technology, but with this humanity side of things to help to make the world a better place. It's quite exciting to see this movement, and it seems to be happening everywhere.
It is happening everywhere, but it's true that Lisbon there's something very special happening here at this very moment. I think the coalescence of people coming from the Web3 space, techies that have a lot of technical knowledge on how this Web3 revolution can feed into those idealisms. It's very powerful. I wrote that, I mean, a few months ago, how Lisbon for me, I came for the poetry, and I now find that it's unearthing a lot of idealisms of all sorts, and also in a very pragmatic manner and practical manner. Because once again, I think having this influx of talents and influx of capital at the same place and a context that allows for dreaming big and trying, I mean, and starting like at a small scale. For me, it's a super beautiful combination, and it's very promising. And I'm grateful for Portugal to create that context.
Hannah, your name means serenity.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned how, you know, kind of engaging in Portugal was along a part of your life where you experiencing a little bit of burnout and overload. And I mean, how does Portugal bring you that serenity and that balance and that peace and that space to refresh, to recharge?
The presence of nature, how accessible that is. I was the other day at Monsanto for an art experience by Eugenia. It's called Eternal Forest, and it's just so simple and beautiful to walk around and play with the leaves, the trees, and so on. You find a lot of this theme in the art scene here that also kind of helped me in my regeneration journey. And also the talents that you find in the well-being space. I mean, I'm part of this group called Hermanas. You ask anything about any expert, acupuncture, Reiki, whatever, you always find a lot of people. And a lot of people are flying to Portugal to organize retreats and so on. There's a good reason for that. I feel like potentially people that are in that space will tell you there's a energetic portal of sorts. But truly, you find this expertise that's at hand, and then you can curate your whole journey. For me, dancing was very much part of, and has become a big part of my life now.
Hannah, what do you want to say? What do you think the world should know about Portuguese people?
I think the world should know about their kindness and how kindness is necessary, absolutely fundamental to kind of feeling like a human being and making sense of what the world is and what the world can be. I feel that the world should know that it is a place where anyone can explore their idealism, and it is also necessary, and it's not something that we should just move away from because everything becomes complicated and too fast, and we're moving on to and there's a lot of tension also. I think it's humaning in Portugal is a beautiful place to be. That's what the world should know.
I've loved this conversation, Hannah. A question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
Because we are.
Because we are simple.
Because we are. This Ubuntu principle. I find it's
Ubuntu. Yeah.
Speaking to Portugal. I am that I am. I am because we are, and Portugal, the simple life because we are.
I like it. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I loved this conversation.
Thank you. Same here. Same here.
And I'm gonna let you call it.
Ooh, what was the word again?
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to our guest, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. Don't forget, Portugal The Simple Life also has a magazine, so download it. It's for free. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and as we say in Portugal, Sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to The Simple Life.